you are looking at is referred to as a sand spit. Now you may be asking yourself, what on earth is a sand spit? And I don't blame you for asking, because I didn't know what a sand spit was either, up until recently. Now at this point, this place may look dead and desolate. After all, there is nothing to be seen with the exception of rocks and miles of dead trees. It may even seem like this place is where crabs come to die, but it's much, much more than that. Now, the definition of a sand spit reads as such: a ribbon of sand extending from the mainland out to sea. It occurs due to waves meeting the beach at an oblique angle, moving sediment down the beach. Whatever. All I know is, since I first saw this place on the map, I knew I had to go check it out because it seemed like a cool place to explore. And that's what I set out to do today. Go for a nice long walk along the beach and find out what's at the end of the Dungeness Spit. It was a beautiful morning at the Dungeness Spit. Normally, this beach is crowded with lots of people walking along its shore, but today, hardly anyone was out. Prior to walking out on the beach, I made sure to check the tide charts, complete with glasses, to make sure I aligned my hike with low tide. After checking the charts, I paid the entry fee and set out on my trek. The start of the trek brought me through a canopy of trees, which served as the only shelter from the sun I would experience along the way. After about a half a mile hike in the trees, I came to a viewing area in which I was properly introduced to the Dungeness Spit. After enjoying the view, I headed down towards the spit. Upon reaching the spit, I stopped for a moment just to take in the view. The crashing of the waves had a calming effect. Now on the beach, it was time to hike along the shore. It was important to time the trek with the low tide, otherwise I would be forced to hike on top of driftwood, which would make the hike even longer. The beach seemed to go on forever. It turns out that the Dungeness Spit is the longest natural sand spit in North America, so I knew it would be a while before I reached the end. This spit averages about 13 feet of growth each year. The small stones along the beach wreaked havoc on my tattered ankles. There was simply no level surface to walk on. And there was no shade to be found on the spit as the sun slowly climbed to the high noon position. After hiking for what seemed like an eternity, I took high ground in an effort to see my final destination. At first, I couldn't see the end of the spit, but with a few deliberate squints, I managed to spot the Dungeness Spit Lighthouse. Way off in the distance, I could see my target, but it seemed like light years away. Now, let's talk about this lighthouse off in the distance. This lighthouse was first lit in 1857. It was the second lighthouse built in Washington, after Cape Disappointment, built in 1856. Presently, the lighthouse is 63 feet high, although that wasn't its original height. It was originally 100 feet high, but had to be lowered after cracks in the structure were found. The total hike to the lighthouse is roughly 5 miles. At the present time, I wasn't quite at the halfway mark, but I continued to press on. It took some time, but each step slowly brought me closer to the lighthouse. My injured ankle was starting to become raw, so if you notice my limp, that's why. As time passed, the lighthouse soon fell within my line of sight. The journey was almost over. As I made my way to the lighthouse, I explored the surrounding area. This dead tree seemed like a great place to test my balance. The water in this area seemed to have very little pollution, which was surprising considering how many ships pass through this area each day. After trekking for a couple of hours, I had finally arrived at my destination, the lighthouse. The place resembled an oasis. Everything in the surrounding area had a hue of brown. The lighthouse, however, sat upon a field of lush green grass, which was in stark contrast to everything around it. At the entrance to the lighthouse was a post which summed up today's journey into 2 words. I took a moment to look around before I read the post. The area was absolutely stunning, and at this stunning place, I was presented with 2 directions I could take. One led to reality, and the other, serenity. I chose the latter, even if it was only for a moment. There's a sign here that says that this is the first lighthouse of the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Which is interesting. There's a bell here. I'm not sure why there's a bell, but who doesn't want to ring a good bell? Apparently I haven't quite mastered the art of ringing a bell. This was undoubtedly the perfect place to have lunch. Famished, I took a few moments to look around before I ate. The lighthouse kind of resembled a mix between an old church and schoolhouse. The structure was well maintained. After a brief look around, it was time to replenish the body. There were picnic tables scattered around the area. I chose the spot right next to the lighthouse.